Hi everyone. In this video of the Getting Started with PyCharm for ArcGIS tutorial series, I'm going to be demonstrating the simple but important step of setting up your Python interpreter. I'm going to show you how to set up an interpreter from a fresh installation of PyCharm. Then we'll confirm your setup is complete by importing ArcPy. The Python interpreter is just the application that runs the Python code we write. The Python we write can't be immediately understood by our computer hardware. Each line has to be converted by the interpreter into a form that your computer understands before it can be run. Interpreters can be configured for the specific types of Python projects for which they'll be used. When working with ArcGIS and ArcPy, we need to use an interpreter that can convert the special functionalities referenced with ArcPy and the associated packages. When ArcGIS Pro is installed, a Python 3 interpreter modified specifically for this purpose is installed with it. We can view the default Python interpreter settings installed with ArcGIS Pro by opening ArcGIS Pro, going to Settings, and selecting Python from the sidebar. Here you can see the name of the default Python interpreter, the directory location of the interpreter, and the packages that are installed with it. We'll go over managing those packages in another video. For now, we want to point to this interpreter within PyCharm so that it can be used in the IDE. In this tutorial, we're going to assume that you've just installed PyCharm Community Edition and are setting up your interpreter for the first time. I'm going to be demonstrating with PyCharm 2020.3.3, but the steps should be fairly similar for other versions of this IDE. So let's go ahead and open PyCharm. When you open PyCharm without any projects open, you'll see this landing page. Typically, we'll see recent projects here, but we don't have any yet. To set up our default interpreter, we're going to go to Customize, All Settings. This is going to open up the Settings menu. I'll show you how to access these settings from an open project later. We can access many settings for PyCharm from this menu, some of which are covered in later videos. Right now, we're interested in the interpreter, so we'll select Python Interpreter from the sidebar. This is where we will tell PyCharm to point to our ArcGIS Pro interpreter by default, so that all of our new projects can use that interpreter. Right now, there are no interpreters listed. We're going to click the Settings button on the right and select Add. PyCharm is automatically detecting my 2.7 interpreter that was installed with ArcGIS Desktop. We want it to point to the Python 3 interpreter that was installed with the ArcGIS Pro installation instead. Since we're new to Python, I'm going to show you the simplest way to set up your interpreter. We may cover additional information and capabilities of virtual environments in a later video. As we saw earlier, ArcGIS Pro installs with a conda-based Python interpreter by default, called ArcGIS Pro-Py3. Conda is the package management system used to set up the interpreter in ArcGIS Pro. Since this is a conda-based interpreter, we're going to select Conda Environment from the sidebar. Then Existing Environment, since the interpreter is already set up with all of the packages we need. Remember that the location of the default interpreter is shown in the ArcGIS Package Manager. Navigate to that location within the options for the existing interpreter. Select the python.exe file and select OK. The conda executable will be loaded automatically. Select OK. After a few seconds, the interpreter is loaded into PyCharm, including all the associated packages. Select Apply and OK to exit back to the main window. Now that our default interpreter is set, let's create a project and see if we can import ArcPy and access its functionality. Select Projects and create a new project. Give it an intuitive name and save it at the default location. Check to make sure that the default interpreter has loaded correctly for this project. As we can see, it's the ArcGIS Pro-Py3 interpreter, which we just pointed to within the Settings menu. We have the option to select a different interpreter here, but we're going to use the default now. Select Create. Once your project opens up, select Python Console at the bottom of the window. Notice that it may take a few moments to connect to the console. Once the console connects, type Import ArcPy on a new line and hit Enter. If after a few seconds you're given a new blank line and no error message, your interpreter is probably installed correctly. Type ArcPy, period, then any additional letters to access additional ArcPy functionality. If you can see different functions associated with ArcPy, your interpreter is correctly configured. Note that if you get a runtime error at this step, you may need to reinitialize your ArcGIS Pro license. That can be done by simply opening ArcGIS Pro. It is recommended that you set ArcGIS Pro to sign in automatically and allow working offline to prevent this issue. Now that your interpreter is set up, you're ready to start working with ArcGIS via PyCharm. This is a basic setup to get you off the ground. As you can see, it doesn't take long, but it's an important step in configuring PyCharm and other IDEs to talk to ArcGIS.